Welcome to Season 3 of the Spotlight series, Don't Just Survive, Thrive. Season 1 was launched to help people through the pandemic by talking to a variety of experts about topics such as psychology, finance, and health. Season 2 focused on more work-related issues, including HR, marketing, and leadership. Now it is time for Season 3. Season 3 is centred on the IT industry, specifically tech startups. There are also career spotlights where I talk to senior IT people about the secrets to their impressive career journeys. My name is Nicola Steel, founder of JJP Talent Solutions, an Australian IT recruitment company. For over 20 years, I've helped tech startups and innovative SMEs to attract, recruit, and retain technical talent. I hope you enjoy listening. I am delighted to introduce Simone Joyce. Simone is the CEO and founder of Paypa Plane and also a board director for FinTech Australia. Simone, thank you very much for joining me on Season 3, Episode 1 of the Spotlight series, Don't Just Survive, Thrive.
Thank you, Nicola. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you. So, Simone, please tell me a bit more about your background and your personal story.
Okay, so I don't think you'll ever come across a startup founder with a linear story to why they are where they are. I guess my journey into founding Paypa Plane started back in 2011. I'd freshly arrived back from living in Dubai for 6 years. I had 2 small children. I was divorced and a little bit lost. So I went back to university at UQ. I was doing organisational psychology, and I came across a program out there called iLab. But it was I think we were the second cohort that went through that. It was like a refreshed iteration of a program that had been around for a few years. And I look back at what we actually pitched to get into that Germinate program at the time, and if I fronted up and pitched that today, let's just say I don't think I'd get a look in. But we got through, and it really opened my eyes to A, technology companies, B, the theory and methodology behind startups, and the opportunities that existed in that space. I loved it. So this was now sort of 2013. We probably spent, and I say we, my now new husband and I were on this journey together. We spent quite a few years trying to get the formula right. It felt like a mini university degree that we were self-guided on, condensed into a very intense period. Had some fantastic mentors along the way. Had a lot of learning experiences, shall we say, which basically means we made some huge mistakes. And
you learn the most from your mistakes.
Absolutely, just kept getting up and dusting ourselves off and going on again. And look, that whole period ended in some pivots and taking on a resource investor of a payments company, which basically meant that they were going to contribute some development resources to my product, and I was to come and work for that company as a product strategy officer. And I loved it. I loved the world of payments, and I loved the product. I loved the team that was working in this company. And it just so happened that probably a year and a half after that, we were in the position to actually acquire the IP out of that company and secure the key development team. We spent about 8 months reworking that IP into being the product that we wanted it to be, and released it back to the market in August of 2018. So here we are.
Wow.
And on the way, I actually managed to scoop up my brother as my co-founder of Paypa Plane as well. He had a lot of skills that I don't have, and I could think of no one better to fill the gaps than my brother. So here we are today.
So your brother, what kind of angle does he come from?
So Jonathan had come out of spending probably the better part of 12 years in the luxury high-end automotive industry, ended up as a dealer principal for some rather nice brands. And along the way, he had acquired the skills of developing a strong sales team, of developing a really good customer-client relationship philosophy. And he has an intrinsic eye for detail. He's very numbers and statistics driven, whereas I'm not. I'm very big picture, this is where we're going and we're going to get there, and this is the overall strategy. So I really needed that extra voice. And look, we've I don't think there's any better person to have a good old argument about something with than a family member, because you can just move on for it very, very easily with shorthand. So it's worked out quite well. Yeah,
definitely. And also, as you say, you complement each other because you're very different. And he's into the detail and you're into the big picture. I'm a big picture person. My husband has to sometimes rein me in. So going back, I think it was 2011 when you first conceived the idea.
No. So
Right.
So that's just when I got back to Australia and went, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with myself now? If you had asked me then, in 2020, do you think that you'll be running a payment technology company? I would have asked you what payment technology was. So, Paypa Plane as a concept really started crystallizing in my head in sort of 2017, I would say. Yeah.
2017. So in 2017, and you came up with this concept, what was the whole purpose behind Paypa Plane?
Yeah, look, I'd had a really bad experience with with payments for my daughter's after school care, direct debit payments, which almost every household in Australia has some form of a third party direct debit that they can't necessarily control coming out of their account. And having been working with a payment technology company at this time, I really started questioning why it was such a bad experience. Why was I getting these extraordinarily high late fees when I'd already, filled out the paperwork and submitted the different payment details, et cetera, et cetera. It all came about because I lost my debit card and had to get a new one. And so once I started unraveling what was going on, I actually realized it's not a simple problem. The payer experience, the high fees, the business experience, and what they need to do in that situation is not simple, and there's not one solve. And I like problems that are hard to solve because I think it makes them worthy of solving. So then I started, thinking about, how could this problem actually be resolved? It's pretty obvious once you zoom out a little bit. It's actually an ecosystem problem. It starts at banking level and then goes down to the third-party providers in that system, then down to the business, then down to the payer. So how it all came about.
So it's based very much on your own personal experience that there must be a better way that's currently happening.
Yeah.
So when you started, what were the main challenges that you really encountered?
So the challenges that we encountered and that I encountered are very much the same story of a lot of early stage fintechs back at that time. Fintech, particularly payment products, have a higher barrier to entry. You can't just start moving money on behalf of whomever because you run into things like AML regulations. You need access directly through a sponsor, a bank. They're very difficult to come by now more than ever. You need to have a certain robustness of product suite. So it's a little bit different to being able to just very quickly spin up an MVP and roll it out to market and test and then bring it back and go again. You need to have actually a really fully developed solution that meets a lot of criteria before you can actually even start looking at, oh yes, this is working really well and this is what needs to change. All that requires time and all that requires resources, runway, without having necessarily a live product to start actually pulling revenue back in. We were very lucky in that we got some excellent support in those early days from banks like Macquarie Bank, who gave us that sponsorship we needed at the time. We had some amazing foundation clients who are still with us today that we learned a lot from once we got that product out. And I found that accessing resources through organisations like FinTech Australia, our regulators like AusPayNet and ASIC and the RBA, we were able to meet all those requirements to get ourselves out into the market, essentially.
So it's developing those relationships.
It's product, it's industry knowledge. So you'll find that a lot of fintech founders have come out of working in an incumbent bank, a financial institution, a loan provider, and so they've spent almost their whole career sucking up this industry knowledge that they can then leverage into their own product. We didn't have that. I had to learn as we went, and very rapidly increase my knowledge and develop the networks that were required as well. And it's just lucky that I do fundamentally love fintech products and payment products. So it was an enjoyable thing for me to do. If it wasn't, there's no way that we could have acquired the correct knowledge and industry understanding that was needed.
So you enjoyed going through the pain because you actually enjoy fintech. And also, you're a female founder, which is a fairly rare breed. So did that create more challenges?
I don't think so. I don't think I ever woke up and went, if only I was a male, this would be so much easier. That was never my thought pattern. I do what I do, and I do it whether I'm male or female. I don't think is something that factors into my operational processes. In saying that, the statistics are very obvious and clear that in the wider startup community, female founders, I think the last figures were something like 24%, not 100% sure. If you look at fintech as a subset of that startup ecosystem, it's even less. So yes, I do know that there's a smaller number of founders than males. Is it something that I feel personally holds me back? Not really, no. And I've along the way at some of our largest banks and some of our regulators, and I've met some amazing females, just incredible people who are achieving amazing things in their career. They are so knowledgeable and so clever at what they do and how they operate. Our Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation, Jane Hume, is also wonderful. So we've really got some good figureheads if we care to seek them out and look for them. Yeah.
So rather than looking at the challenges, are the benefits, do you think, of being female that you can bring as a founder?
I think so. And I think it comes back to diversity of thought. If you think about not just the people who are founding companies, who are using these products, who are accessing these products, our user base extends from banks to other payment companies, all the way through to small to medium enterprises. And we have so many females who start their own small business, and then it grows to be a medium business, et cetera, et cetera. So if you think about, okay, if you only have a team of people who think the same and operate the same, the product is going to be very one-dimensional and might not meet the needs at the other end. So I think that it's probably an advantage in that respect. I look at things more in a different way than our development team does, than my co-founder does, than our product designer does. So it's good to have that representation.
So thinking about the customer on the other side, and having the customer as the first thing, as you say, the diversity of thought there.
That's right, yeah.
So when you were setting up Paypa Plane, what were your core values, and has that influenced the culture of the organisation?
It has. We set out to do something very tricky, which is it's not a traditional thing that particularly payment providers do. And we wanted to not just serve one niche of the landscape. And I alluded to this earlier. We wanted to serve the full stakeholder range. So that starts at your banks and payment service providers, goes down to businesses, and critically goes down to payers. And it's that payer aspect that has really been overlooked. To get that balance right between serving a payer whilst ensuring the business has the space to do what they feel they need to do is a very tricky thing to do. And what we've actually been able to do is use that backbone of we need to put our users first, but we have different users. So therefore, our product needs to develop in a way that is completely customizable to whichever user base it is. That has meant that as a company, we've had to very carefully focus on what is our purpose. Well, our purpose is actually not just to make paying your gym membership easier for the business or the payer. Our purpose is to improve the system as a whole. So that guides us in a lot of things. It also means that we have to be very careful in agnostic thinking. So just because we personally feel that, it's not okay to have a fee of X, Y, Z, actually it might be suitable for that business, and we just need to give them the space to operate as suits them. So it's a very different way of thinking than other providers in the space. And we have that luxury because we're a software as a service provider. We don't actually touch anyone's money, and we don't provide payments these days. We're an overlay service. So that's a luxury for us. It's also translated into the way that our team dynamic is. So allowing everyone to be able to contribute their ideas and thoughts is really important. And I think that's the same across most startups. There's no point having these amazing people who are very intelligent, very good at what they do, and they're not listening to what they're telling you or not giving them the opportunity to contribute. And it took us a little while to get to that sort of more open communication space. We've done some work, pre-COVID work this year on disc profiling. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Yeah, DISC, which really was about how do we effectively communicate with each other? How do we each prefer to operate? And how can we optimize that the best? And that was actually a really good thing to do. Yeah.
And that disc aspect, it's good to have different people sitting in the different quadrants
that's right.
across the organisation, which of course you did organisational psychology, so...
I didn't finish it, though. I jumped out and went, startups are where I want to be.
But it had given you some knowledge.
Yes, true.
It's funny, I did a geography degree and still would be hanging around the library reading psychology books, so I find it quite fascinating as well. I digress, though. So in terms of the team, from what you said earlier, I don't think inherit's the right word, but you had some of the development team that moved over. And so what sort of size now are you? And at what point did you decide to really start growing the team?
Okay, so when we started development on the product in January 2018, there were 4 developers working on it who each were excellent in their own specific field, their own specific niche of developing the product, and myself and my brother, and we had a part-time product designer. Once we went live in August that year, we really wanted to start taking advantage of the user feedback that we were getting, which meant we needed more resources to be able to process that properly and iterate as quickly as what our customers wanted us to do. So at that point, we were very fortunate in getting another amazing developer who started January 2019. And then by the end of that year, we'd hired another developer as well. So we're now a team of 10, obviously still technically heavy as far as team spread goes. We've got an excellent sort of a client services officer who helps with all of the administrative assistance and support that comes with onboarding new customers. And we've obviously got a full-time product designer now as well, and still my brother and myself. So look, we were planning honestly to grow probably by another 3 or 4 people towards the end of this year, but that might be pushed back now to the beginning of next year, just with the disruptions that we've all seen come about this year.
The disruption and the uncertainty.
Well, and also it's very difficult to successfully onboard people into an environment that is driven by a lot of processes and procedures. So, for example, we achieved our ISO 27001 certification a few weeks back, and to bring somebody on in an environment where we're not all in the same place and make sure that they are cognizant of all the processes and why we have these things in place, let alone get their head around, okay, I'm coming into a new development environment, a new team environment. It was an exercise that was probably a little bit futile for us for the last few months. So once we settle back into an office routine, and we're all fairly confident that we're not going to have a phase 2 lockdown or anything like that, we can probably start looking at our hiring and expansion plans again. Yeah.
And actually, with regards to the working from home, schooling from home that we've experienced this year, I've talked to a lot of people and they've said, actually, I really quite like this remote working. I'd like to spend 3 days at home, 2 days in the office, for example. Is that something that you think would be ever possible with Paypa Plane, or is it just because of all the compliance and everything, it's difficult?
No, we're in the process of actually doing that now. So today, as we speak, I'm personally at home, but 3 of our team are working from the office. And we've got a roster. Our office isn't quite large enough to accommodate everybody back at once and still adhere to the required distancing. And I refuse to put perspex up between every desk. So we will work on a roster system, and that seems to suit most people. It gives that balance. It's actually a really good balance. I think it's one of the good things to have come about over all of this is suddenly we all appreciate the fact that you can achieve things effectively from your home environment if required. On the flip side of that is some people have become aware that they really need to work in an office to be productive, and that's fine. It's opened up that individual pathway a little bit more, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And one size doesn't fit all. So as the company's grown, what problems have you encountered and how did you overcome that?
That's a tricky question to answer, simply because I don't think that there's been anything super unique that we've encountered that other startups in their early growth phase similarly wouldn't have encountered and overcome. So one of the things that I battle with all the time is, how do I assign priority? We've literally in our we use ClickUp to organise as the hub where non-developers and developers can come in and organise tasks. We've literally got 81 things in backlog. How do we prioritise that? How do we prioritise that through serving our existing customer demands, asking for new features, whilst also looking at how we're growing? So developing more capability as far as being able to flick a switch and have a white label in market and operating. So that's my biggest challenge daily, is balancing priorities and making sure that whatever we commit to, we're committing to not just on a time basis, but linking that back to the fact that it does cost money. Every day that people are developing features and functions, it costs money, and we need to make sure we have a viable return on that, whether it's down to, we'd like to spend 30% of our budget on purely innovative activities this month, which is such a luxury if you can do that, versus, okay, we know that every month 6% of our capital goes towards maintenance tasks. So making sure that everyone's operating as they should, that there's, bug fixes are happening, et cetera, et cetera.
Your story is fantastic. I really enjoyed hearing that. If you were to turn back the clock, would you do anything differently?
I don't think so, simply because when things have gone totally tits up, can I say that?
You're fine.
Okay. I've always learnt something, and it's not just knowing about our specific niche in the payments industry in Australia. It's also about knowing all the other bits that come with creating a high growth company. If I hadn't had the opportunity to make the mistakes that I made and hadn't met the people I met, et cetera, there's no way that I would feel as confident as I do today in saying, yes, this is what we're going to achieve in the next 5 years. I still know there's a lot that I don't know that I need to learn along the way. But if I took anything away from our previous experience, then I probably would be having a knowledge gap, another one today to deal with. So, yeah.
Yes, as we said before, you learn from your mistakes and get better. And you arrived back in Australia in 2011.
Yes.
Where did you think you'd be when it was back in 2011? Where did you think you'd be in 2020?
I thought I'd be a midwife. Yeah, I'd been accepted into midwifery at UQ, and the reason that I couldn't take the offer is it was straight into shift work at the hospital. and I had a let me see, Rose was just gone 2 and Flynn was 4, and I was obviously a single parent at the time, so I couldn't accommodate the shift work. So I had to kind of that's how I ended up with organisational psychology. I went, well, what else can I do? But yeah, that's still in the back of my mind. One day
Yeah,
when I move on to the next thing, I would still like to do that. Yeah.
There are no similarities between being a midwife and being a fintech founder. Although it seems that the children were kind of the central piece in your decision making because of the issues with the childcare payments.
It's funny, actually. Yeah, you're the first person who's actually drawn that line. Yes, that is true. And I guess they're anyone who has children wants to be able to not just provide a happy and safe childhood, but provide them something that they can look back on and go, yes, that's right. I remember my parents doing that. That is, hard work and persistence and resilience and all that sort of stuff is something that we saw acted out every day. I certainly had that with my mother growing up. Didn't appreciate it at the time, very much do now. But I think that there's no better foundation for your own children's success in life than actually going out and doing something that's really bloody hard and getting it done. So hopefully they look back and appreciate that in years to come.
I'm sure they will. And actually, interestingly, I set up a company in the UK, and that was based off having my first child. And then when we moved to Australia, I had to go back to the corporate world, and it just didn't excite me. And I remember my daughter, who would probably have been, how old was she? 10 or 11. And she said, Mummy, you were so much happier when you worked for yourself. Gosh, you're right, actually. And she was the one that put the idea in my head. So
isn't that incredible that she could perceive that, where you were in the thick of it and probably weren't aware of it at that point?
Yeah, well, she's always been a very grown up person. She's 15 going on 50. It's she's at school, so she can't hear me. So, with regards to Paypa Plane, it's nearly your second birthday, I think. Is that right?
It is. So it's funny. 13th of August is the day we switched on payment systems and did our first transaction. And I'm actually having our 4th child on the 14th of August this year.
Wow.
So, could have been a double anniversary.
Goodness me.
No, auspicious days in August for us.
Yeah. And also we could do another podcast on how do you do it for children.
I have an amazing husband. Trust me, without him, there's no way any of this would operate. He's the glue that keeps it all together.
Fantastic. But so 2 years, what's the long-term plan for Paypa Plane? Where can you see yourself in 2025, 2030?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So I have a few very clear things that we want to achieve through Paypa Plane, not just for me, but for the whole team. The day that we can all sort of sit back and go, wow, we did that, that would be very cool. So there's a lot happening in the next immediate future. So MPP and the MPS, which is mandated payment services. Open banking will bring about a lot of changes for us. So really consolidating and gaining, I guess, a lot of market share through our banks and payment providers will be a great thing. Probably in about somewhere between the 5 to 7, maybe 10-year mark, I can see a trade sale or acquisition, maybe through a global payment provider, maybe through a local one. At that point, we have clearly, we have a plan to, well, I would like to do midwifery, but we also want to move to Tasmania and start a duck and seaweed farm. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, we want to do that on our own term without, having any concern about it being a purely commercial enterprise. Yeah.
Wow, you really when you pivot.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So what's the fascination with the seaweed and was it ducks, did you say?
Ducks, yeah. So there's no old breed European ducks like Aylesbury in Australia. It's a really big gap in the market, and there's no value added duck products. There's a cohort called Lover Duck that have kind of cornered the market, but not high end. I could talk about that for a while. I won't. It's not interesting for most people. And seaweed, well, seaweed is the way of the future, and Tasmania's salmon farms are depleting the ecosystem in the ocean, and seaweed actually replenishes and replaces a lot of that. It's like crop rotation. And apart from that, they make a really interesting, delicious, and nutritious food crop. So, that's what we want to do.
Wow, that's fantastic.
To be fair, I want to do the seaweed more than my husband does. I'm obsessed with seaweed, but he's not so interested. He's more about the ducks.
I love that. I'm obsessed with seaweed. It's like
I do. When we go away on holiday, I forage and nibble on it.
Oh my goodness. Well, Simone, this conversation took a completely different
Sorry.
But I like doing that. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Is there anything else that you'd particularly like to share?
Look, I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I can't think of anything that I'd like to share, except to say that if you are at the beginning of your journey and starting your own company, I think the best thing to do is acknowledge that the best skill in your arsenal is going to be resilience, because there is going to be days where you don't want to do it, and there is going to be days where things go horribly wrong, the wheels come off. But conversely, there will also, if you push through that, be the days where the most amazing thing happens, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're looking for career advice, your next career opportunity, or to grow your tech team, then please call me, Nicola Steel, on 0499 773 546, or go to our website, jjptalent.com.au. The Don't Just Survive, Thrive podcast is part of the Spotlight series, which includes the YouTube channel Spotlight on Software Development. If you want more insights into the software industry, particularly tech startups, then subscribe to the Spotlight on Software Development YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. Until next time.